So Warhammer 40k's got a new expansion rulebook in the works. There's a big box set release for Necromunda Hive Secundus this weekend, more clues for the next 40k releases, and perhaps a slightly surprising absence of a reveal show on the cards for the next US Open. Let's talk through all the 40k news and what it means. Hello and welcome back to Autobets Tactics, where today it's time for another Warhammer news roundup. Plenty of interesting stuff on the way, though I feel like most of these didn't really need a video all to themselves, though I might go a bit more in depth in some of them in a later date. For this one we're talking through the new Boarding Actions rulebook for 10th edition, which updates the game to actually work with contemporary 40k. The Necromunda Hive Secundus box set comes out, and its pricing doesn't seem quite as bad as some of the things in Games Workshop's past. The removal of some data cards implies that Deathwatch and Imperial Agents really is just around the corner, and it seems that there's a bit of absence of news on the next 40k reveal front. Nothing mentioned for another 40k reveal show at their next tournament, despite it usually being in their calendar. All that and a few bits more, with other releases and teasers over the week, including an interesting holographic Easter egg that looks to be a release for the 41st millennium. First up though, let's start with a new expansion rulebook. This one's the Boarding Actions one, and it was revealed the other day in a Warhammer 40k preview article. Boarding Actions is basically Games Workshop's 40k but indoors game mode that they released towards the tail end of 9th edition, most of the rules coming out in the expansion pack around the Arcs of Omen sort of releases. Each one of those added new ways to play the game, plus quite a big deal was made out of the faction-specific content for each one of them to try and flesh out the different armies and how they can play in that mode. As expansions go, I feel like it's been at least fairly successful for Warhammer 40k. Obviously the following of it is a bit more niche than the mainstream game. Not everyone who plays Warhammer 40k was playing Boarding Actions. The main barriers to entry I think were getting the Arcs of Omen rulebooks and also owning the specific terrain set for it. As Warhammer terrain goes, it wasn't undoable, but it did mean buying a board of Games Workshop priced terrain, which is usually going to set you back at least a fair bit. For the actual gameplay, in 9th edition at least, it was pretty well received, lots of people enjoying the missions, and Games Workshop releasing more supplemental content via White Dwarf. But it was a bit disappointing with the way that they updated it for 10th. The 10th edition launch really not too far behind the whole Boarding Actions release, and in general the 10th edition rule set for Boarding Actions was just considered a fair bit worse, far less in depth, and basically waiting for an expansion such as this. I certainly did hear anecdotally of plenty of people sticking with the 9th edition rules if they wanted to make use of their Boarding Actions game. In any case though, now it looks like the game's due for a refresh, rather than having all the content split out between 4 slightly arbitrary campaign books, which I didn't think was necessarily the most helpful thing for acquiring the full rule set. It's all just going to be in one book this time round, which I think is kind of helpful. It'll contain the core rules for playing Boarding Actions in 10th edition, and then each faction that can play it, so that's everyone other than Imperial and Chaos Knights, will each get a boarding patrol roster. According to Games Workshop's article, each faction will be getting at least 2 of them, and those are basically going to represent the faction-specific rules for 10th edition, having a set of units that you can swap out between, and also adding in detachment rules, enhancements and stratagems depending on what you pick. I guess in theory there's 24 or 25 playable factions, so that's really going to be a fairly hefty amount of faction-specific content, definitely a lot of depth that you can have in this one, and lots of potential interactions between one army and another, particularly when each army could choose multiple different patrols. Then there'll be all the missions and ways to play. Boarding Actions typically tends to have a fixed terrain setup, objectives, hatches and scatter terrain as dictated by certain missions, and some of the missions are asymmetrical and a bit more narrative in theme, rather than literally being a completely balanced 1v1 and fight over the objectives. They did give us a couple of examples of boarding patrols, Genestealer Cult ones, and you basically get 2 different patrols, one called the Cult Unveiled and one called the Genespawn Onslaught. I feel like the ones in 9th edition were a bit more flexible than this, but you basically have to take a couple of sets between a whole bunch of binary choices. Say for example the Cult Unveiled one, you choose between a Magus and Primus to lead the army, and then you take 2 out of a set of sort of raised characters, the Acolyte, Icon, Ward, Clamavus, Kelemorph, Locus or Sanctus, 3 squads of Horde sort of troops, and then a squad of Acolytes with Handflamers. The other one has the Abominant Benefactors and Biophagus leading to Aberrants and some Metamorphs into battle, so a bit more of a twisted close combat force there. It's maybe not quite as free-for-all as some of the ones in 9th edition, but still does add a few big elements of choice, and overall I feel like it seems a pretty interesting idea. I feel like with expansions of this though, it does maybe underline just how short the shelf life certain 40k expansions can have though. The Arcs of Omen books with all the Boarding Actions content really didn't last long at all. They were very rapidly made kind of hard to use with the 10th edition rule set unless you jury-rigged the rules a bit for the faction-specific stuff, and now to be totally invalidated by this book coming out. It seems like it'll probably be something like a year and a half after the Arcs of Omen series finished. I guess there's nothing to stop you going back and playing 9th edition with boarding actions, and certainly some people tend to. It does mean there's probably not going to be quite as many games on offer for that kind of thing though, just given that people often tend to move on with rule sets. I would have to make quite a bit of efforts to relearn the 9th set if they want to play games of it. Judging by the edition release cycle, I guess that this coming expansion should probably be good for at least a couple of years. I'd guess that you'll probably still be able to play it in 11th edition, as it seems like if Games Workshop's following their pattern, there probably won't be a full hard rule reset this time around. So hopefully as Games Workshop expansion books go, this one should last a bit longer than most, I would guess. In any case though, it looks like reaction to this has been at least fairly positive online. I feel like a fair few people are looking forward to playing boarding action with some 10th edition rules. Let me know whether or not the new boarding actions mode is going to be something that interests you for 10th edition or not. Next up, some of the other biggest news for this week is that Necromunda Hive Secundus is going on pre-order this weekend. The main pre-order for the box set should be going live on the 20th of July, and then the full sale on the 3rd of August, 2 weeks later normally. It's interesting that I've seen really quite a lot of different sources citing slightly different prices, but it looks like it's around about $170, €140 or £105. It's going to be in that sort of ballpark, but I've seen lots of different sources putting like 3 different slightly tweaked versions of those prices out there, so it looks like it's going to be in a roundabout that sort of area. And if so, that really could be worse. Lots of Games Workshop's big box sets tend to run at a lot more than that. I guess this one for Necromunda, compared with things like the previous Ash Waste starter sets that was far more expensive, doesn't really come with quite as many big terrain things as that one. It still looks like a box set that's going to be fairly popular though. I feel like there was a fair bit of hype and interest around this when they revealed it. It's the one with the Aura Spirers, the Vansar Tech Gang, and they're versus the Mouse-Train Gene Stealers with 6 of those, 8 Brood Scum, and those little floating Mouse-Train Tyromites, or with some terrain, a game board, and the big rulebook for playing Hive Secundus. Alongside that, there's quite a lot of peripheral launch releases as well for Necromunda. They teased a good bit of terrain on one of their Monday previews. There's this Hive data stack cluster with some ancient and warped 40k terminals, a ruined Zone Mortalis terrain set with a bunch of blasted pillars, vault doors, and things like that. The main Necromunda rulebook itself is on sale individually as well, and they also have a 4-12 resin release for the Proxy and the Fixer, a couple of allied characters. As ever, if you were looking to pre-order it, then doing so through any of the links down in the video description can allow you to get it a little bit cheaper, as well as supporting Auspex Tactics a little. I'd hope that discount retailers will probably be able to get quite good supply of this one, though you never really know with Games Workshop whether or not there's going to be far less than people would like. In any case, the links down in the video description for your area can save a fair bit of money versus Games Workshop's web store, and if you did happen to order anything through them, it does help to support Auspex Tactics a little bit as well, so a big thank you to anyone using those. Moving on, another clue for the Deathwatch Inquisition and Agent of the Imperium type release that seems to be on the cards was pointed out to me when I made the last video on the subject. As mentioned when I talked about the product removals last time round, there are a whole bunch of slightly curious choices just no longer on sale. Inquisitor Greyfax and Kyria Draxus, the Imperial Assassins, which tend to be quite popular models as they go. The Deathwatch Combat Patrol box sets, which have generally tended to be removed fairly shortly before a new codex went live. And also one thing that I missed that was pointed out to me are that both the Agents of the Imperium and the Deathwatch datasheet cards are gone. All the rest of the index ones in the UK are in stock, but both of those are removed. Again, just yet another clue to show that both of these are coming in tandem, likely in some sort of new reinterpreted version where they're both in the same book. Some nice Inquisition, Deathwatch, and various Ordos, it would seem. It is kind of surprising that all of these things are going away, and yet we've had absolutely no news of the 40k releases yet. Typically, Games Workshop don't tend to take things down off sale quite so long before a new release comes, but they also tend to announce new releases like this a good way in advance as well. So no telling at the moment whether or not the Deathwatch and Agents update is coming really soon or quite a long way away. Talking of news and reveals, one thing that I mentioned in lots of previous videos is that it was likely that the next reveal show was probably going to be coming in the Tacoma Open in Washington. Typically when Games Workshop have these big events in the USA, they tend to have a live reveal show to go alongside them. Usually one thing that happens live at the event itself, and then having it broadcast around the world with their presenters. A fun reveal show happening at some sort of ungodly hour in the morning here in the UK normally. Given that they usually reveal stuff at these, and there has been a bit of a drought on 40k news for a while now, I really was expecting some sort of show at this one. On the 40k side of things, we tend to know the next few codexes that are coming out, with lots of previewed character releases and box sets and things, but that's not the case at the moment. Aside a few leaks and rumours and things, Games Workshop have said pretty well nothing about the codexes that are coming out next, and at this point I'd at least expect them to tell us what's on the horizon for them. Given all that, it was just kind of surprising at this stage Games Workshop still haven't announced that they're doing a reveal show in Tacoma. Usually they tend to announce that either on the Monday before or often 2 weeks in advance, giving everyone the times around the world that they need to try and tune in for, and that gives them some big viewing figures. I honestly was guessing that would probably appear on Monday this week, but it just seems not to. And now we're just 2 days out from the event itself, it's just seeming far less likely. So maybe a little bit disappointing that we're not getting any big releases on that. Not entirely sure for the motivation of that. I'm not sure if the people who are just doing these slightly higher class reveal shows that they've been doing over the past few might not be available or something. It's possible that it might just be showing off any new releases just on their Warhammer community webpage previews. I guess we did get that Boarding Actions book today. I feel like that would have been a pretty reasonable one to show off at a reveal show if they'd wanted to. I guess we'll wait on see on that though. They still haven't 100% confirmed it's not happening. I guess it wouldn't be impossible for them to announce a last minute one, and I'll most certainly cover it here on the channel if they do. Would be quite nice just to get a bit of a roadmap of the codexes though. Otherwise though, as well as Deathwatch things, we have had a few other teasers for what comes next. We know there's going to be Deathwatch and Agents of the Imperium. It seems that the rumoured Scions vs Vespid box set is likely a go given the lore teasers we had last week. And this week Games Workshop gave us a pretty fun little hologram teaser. Not enormously clear exactly what sort of model or what sort of army it's from, but it did seem to be a bit of an Easter egg. Essentially it looks like a holographic projector that is broadcasting a tiny little Fortress of Redemption, one of Games Workshop's bigger terrain sets. Long since out of production though. Kind of has similar sort of vibes to the Genestealer Cult Nexus that they had, where they had him strategizing over a bunch of buildings that kind of looked like Warhammer World. Not entirely sure exactly what this one's from. I feel like Space Marines and things don't generally tend to have holographic things on the go. But I guess if it's going down the Nexus sort of route, then maybe it could be a strategist, planner, or siege expert of some sort. I feel like a lot of online reactions said maybe this might be something from the 10th edition Leagues of Votann release potentially. I guess the sort of hydraulic-y sort of casing for that projector might go with that. There's really not much view of the model aside from the hologram thing itself to say though. Either way, kind of fun. I do appreciate the little Easter egg. Otherwise, for this week's releases, there's a bunch of the Old World, a battle tome for the Dwarves, a Dwarven King on shield bearers, which I think is quite a fun miniature, and then just a massive amount of old school Warhammer Dwarf units re-released. The Dwarven Mountain Horse Battalion with the Gyropter type things that you can see, plus a whole load of individual unit releases on top of that. Again, that will all be going on live on the 20th of July for pre-order from Games Workshop and a bunch of discount retailers. For next major releases around the corner, there are a few other things that we know about. There are still a slew of kill teams that need a release at some point. Things like the Mandrakes, Night Lords, Votann and Brood Brothers all go into individual box sets, and the other one that we'd had previewed for a while now is the Horus Heresy Mechanicum Battle Group box set. This great big launch box that's kind of similar to the Solar Auxilia type one, taking the Castellax Automata, the Thalax sort of cyborg things, and a bunch of Tech Thralls and the Triaris Armoured Conveyor. I feel like this one almost has to be not so very far away now. All the other things revealed at Games Workshop's previous big preview have come out. Now we know the proper launch for Necromunda Secundus, so if you are looking forward to some battle automata, then that won't be too far away. I know there'll be at least a fair few 40k AdMech players who'll be crying some tears of oil that they can't use some of the fun automata things in their 40k armies. I think it really would make sense for Games Workshop to release some rules for them. It's not like the AdMech are particularly adverse to using tech relics from the Heresy. Finally, for another little teaser this week, I was interested to take a look at a few of the Age of Sigmar starter sets. These ones basically feel like they're the equivalent of the 40k starter set and Ultimate starter set that accompanied Leviathan. Games Workshop kind of doing just rinse and repeat on that. 3 box sets of a similar sort of scale, aimed at people breaking into the game at various different sizes. The introductory set is the one that's kind of bare bones but comes with paint and dice and things, so basically everything that you need to play a Warhammer Age of Sigmar game at the absolute most basic level, having some Skaven clan rats versus some Stormcast. Then there's the more standard starter sets that often tends to be a fairly good deal for the actual miniatures contained. Again, plenty of clan rats, some of those big rat ogres, and the Stormcast get their mage and those prosecutors added. The Skaven get their fun grey seer as well. Then there's the big ultimate starter set. This is the one that comes with a few more big fancy miniatures, that Fire and Jade rulebook for the whole spearhead sort of game. And this one adds in some terrain and the primary leaders for the entire Skaven type box set. The 2 characters on mounts. Could be interesting if you want to check out a bit of Age of Sigmar without having to buy the absolute really big box set. I feel like comparatively Skaven Tide is probably going to look like a better deal from these if you run the numbers on miniatures contained. And of course there's the option of picking up anything that people are selling second hand, say individual unit breakdowns from Skaven Tide if you just want a few Ratmen or fun Stormcast miniatures to paint up. In any case, plenty of reveals, teasers and new releases. I still think it would be kind of nice at the moment to know exactly when 40k is going to get a bit more news as to what comes next. Hopefully GW won't be keeping us waiting as long on that front. Look forward to hearing your thoughts on all the news and releases though. Would you be interested in that boarding actions rulebook? Are you going to be picking up Necromunda Hive Secundus or passing on that one? And what do you reckon that hologram rumour engine could be? Look forward to hearing all your thoughts down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones each day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep the videos coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.